Start recording. This is Taylor Elwood, your business wizard for Imagine Your Reality, and really imagineyourreality.com, and you're a centric entrepreneur. Let me start over. All right. This is Taylor Elwood, your business wizard for eccentric entrepreneurs at imagineyourreality.com, and today we are doing a webinar on how to handle failure in business. So if you have questions, feel free to type them in the group chat as we go through, and I will do my best to answer them. If you've been on the Eccentric Entrepreneurs group all month, you've probably been paying attention to the fact that I've been talking about this concept of failure in business a fair amount. In fact, I've been posting about it in my newsletter as well. And you might wonder, well, why are you doing that? The truth is because I see a lot of what I would consider to be a fairly toxic business environment, a business culture, and it's namely this, that there is so much emphasis on positive thinking, on how you need to stay positive, that it's really hard puts a lot of pressure on people not to fail or not to admit that they're failing. And the problem with that is that it ends up isolating you. And you don't want to be isolated, because when you're isolated, it is very hard to effectively feel like you can actually move forward with your business, because you're looking at everyone else and you're saying to yourself, why am I not like this person? Everyone else is doing better than me. Everyone else has it together. Everyone else is more successful. Well, I want to let you in on a little secret. The reality is that no matter at what level of success someone is at, they have failed tons of times in order to get to that level of success. And not only that, but regardless of what level of success they're at, they have their own issues, their own worries, and their own fears. They're just not being honest with themselves about it. Or maybe they are, but they're not sharing it with anyone else. So the thing is that failure is a lot more common than you might think. In fact, if you look at your average first year of business, you'll find that most businesses end up failing pretty much right out the door. Hello there, how are you? It looks like we have someone joining us. I'm going to put you on mute, and you can feel free to ask questions as you're listening, and I'll answer them. And I may occasionally unmute people in order to kind of get your perspectives. So anyway, as I was saying, that first year of business is, it's hard. And a lot of people end up failing in that first year of business. And the problem is that people aren't always honest about it. Like how many, if you've gone to a networking event, right, you talk to somebody and you say, how's business going? The typical answer is going to be, business is fine. Well, we all know that the word fine is a 4-letter word that really means no, nothing is going well, right? If I tell you that I'm fine, you know that that's a typical social response that's used to avoid really being present with what's going on. So I think it's very important that you recognize that, that about business, that really there are a lot of people out there who are failing, and it's okay. You say, well, why should we be okay with admitting failure? And I'll tell you why. Because the only way we can learn from failure is, in fact, to be able to be comfortable with it, to be able to admit that we're comfortable with it. It is very hard to fail and not learn from failure. Yet, the way that people end up not learning from it is their inability to admit that they failed. And I'll tell you that I have failed numerous times in my business. I started out in 2008, okay, with my business. And it's taken me it's 2016, 8 years later, and I've definitely made some mistakes along the way. I look at some people who started their businesses a lot later than I did. Like there's a couple people I've seen where they started their businesses like 2010 or 2012 or 2014, and they're doing better than I am. And it's like, wow. What am I not doing that they're not doing? Well, I mean, honestly, some people pick up certain skills better than other people. Some people learn lessons sooner or whatever else. In some cases, though, it really comes right down to a person's inability to recognize that they're failing. And for me, for a long time, I had trouble acknowledging that I was failing. I put a lot of pressure on myself to say that, yeah, I'm successful with my business, even when I wasn't. And why did I put that pressure? Well, part of it was because of that toxic positivity that I saw in the business culture around me. If you're in a place where you're constantly being told that, you know, you've got to be positive about what's going on with your business, it can be very hard to acknowledge that you are failing, because we don't want to look like we're the only person in the room that's negative. So the first step to really learning from your failures is being able to acknowledge and admit it, and also being able to acknowledge and admit that there may be some pressure on your end to, quote unquote, be positive. Now, does anyone have any questions about that before I continue on? If you do have questions, you can go ahead and type them in the chat, and I will answer them. And while you're thinking about that, I'll just tell you that the first time that I really, truly acknowledged that I had failed with my business wasn't in 2010 when I switched from my social media presence to there we go. It wasn't in 2010 when I switched from social media consulting to business coaching. I was actually doing pretty good with social media consulting. But I didn't like doing it anymore. So I didn't fail then. When I failed was when it was really last year at about this time. That's when I first acknowledged that I really failed. I've been, from 2010 to 2015, I've been doing the business coaching, and I'd had some clients, I'd done some stuff, but I was really depressed in 2015. And the reason I was depressed is it just felt like everything was stuck in a rut. I wasn't going anywhere. And the reason that I realized, what made me realize that I failed was the very fact that I knew I was stuck and I couldn't go any further in the direction I was going in. Everything wasn't working. No matter what I did, it didn't seem to work. And that was really hard for me to face, because if I couldn't accept that it wasn't working, you know, how was I going to move forward? So I had to ultimately accept that it wasn't working, and that was tough. So I don't have any questions right now, so I'm going to kind of continue on with learning from failure. So here's what we end up ultimately learning in regards to failure. When I admitted that I was failing, it liberated me to actually learn from it. And I think it's really important to be able to do that, that sometimes you can just say, you know what, I'm failing. I failed. I screwed up. I made these mistakes. When you can do that, it actually liberates you. At first, you might feel really down, really depressed. I failed. It didn't work out. But when you can acknowledge that, in fact, you have actually managed to recognize your failure, then what happens is you start to say, well, what can I learn from that failure? So what did I do? Well, at about this time last year, a little bit later than that, I said, you know what? I need to take a month off from everything. I failed. I need to spend some time and take a month off from everything I'm doing, all the writing I'm doing, all the other activities I'm doing, and just really take a good hard look at myself. And I'll tell you, that was hard to do. Because I was convinced, you know, I got to do all these things. I got to write my blog post. I got to spend time taking care of all these other things. I got to do all these activities. I got to go out networking. I got to do all these other activities that aren't bringing in any money, but hey, I got to do them because that's what a successful business owner does. That was what had happened. I'd fallen into this illusion that I had to do all of these things in order to be successful. And none of the things I was doing was making me successful. All the blog entries I was writing, it wasn't getting me anybody signing up for my newsletter. All the networking meetings I was going to, it wasn't getting anyone who was interested in my services. All it was doing was having me spin my wheels. I was stuck. So when I acknowledged that I had failed, I took some time off. And that's something that I would really recommend that you consider doing if you feel like you have gotten into a situation where you failed, is take a break away from what you're doing. Because let's face it here, if you know that you failed, then you know that what you're doing isn't working. And there's that one saying that, the definition of insanity is that you continue to do the same thing over and over again. Well, that saying's true. I basically realized, I was insane to continue networking and insane to continue writing all these blog entries without really taking a break and figuring out what wasn't working and what could work. So I took a month off. During that month, I didn't write. I did go to networking meetings, and I ultimately ended up taking a month off from going to networking meetings, about a month later after I had finished taking the first break. But what I ended up doing is I realized that I needed to take that break because in the consecutive order that I took it, because it was something where if I left everything I was doing, I don't know that I could have handled it. So the first month I took off from writing, and I didn't write anything other than for myself. And what that month did is it showed me how the writing I was doing was impersonal. So I'm going to tell you what I did discover. So what it showed me that month when I took it off is it showed me, and for people who aren't here, what Sarah asked is, what kind of things did you discover during your break? Did you figure out new approaches? So yes, what I discovered when I took the month off from writing is I discovered that my writing was impersonal, and it was very cold and intellectual, and nobody really enjoyed it. And that was hard. I've written tons of books, and I wanted and I wanted to think that my writing meant something to people reading, and I realized for the most part it didn't. The books themselves are great, and I have gotten good feedback from them. But like my blog posts and all that, it was just, and my newsletters, they were just boring. And that's the first thing I learned, is that I had impersonal writing that was boring. I realized that I was afraid to connect with people. I was afraid to let them in. I was afraid to show them who I am. And the reason I was afraid to do that was because I had spent so long keeping people at a distance in my life that the idea of letting them in terrified me. Part of it, too, is that I wanted to have a very concrete break, a partition between myself and like in my businesses. So, for example, one of my other things that I realized is that, I was basically, even though I was, quote unquote, openly public about the fact that I'm a pagan occult author, when I go to business meetings, I did everything I could to avoid talking about that. Because some part of me was afraid that if people knew what I believed in, they wouldn't want to do business with me. So that was a huge realization as well. And I realized that month when I was taking the break off, that what I had done is I created these very painful partitions in my life, and that I wasn't being authentically myself in my writing. So did I discover new approaches? Yes, I did. What I ended up discovering is that I needed to rethink how I wrote everything. I needed to make it more personal. I needed to let people in, and I needed to stop pretending I wasn't a pagan and occult author. I needed to just embrace it and accept that that's who I am. It's also when I decided to start shooting videos. I've been shooting videos for a while, but it's when I decided to start really being more open and letting people in with the videos as well. So I started really challenging myself. How can I show up as a person? How can I let people in? And I'll tell you, it was terrifying. It was very hard to do that. But I found that when I changed the tone of my writing, when I started making it more personal, when I started talking about things that were relevant to me, and I started making it more about who I am and not just what I know, that's when people started responding. I started getting more email signups. I started getting people more interested in connecting with me. And my friends even said, you're more approachable. I actually want to spend more time with you, which I guess says a lot to me in some ways, because, I wasn't even likable as a friend in some ways. Let me tell you, that was a very hard thing to face, the fact that I was not a very likable person. It hurt. I'm not going to lie to you. It really hurt in some ways, because I realized how much I'd done that to myself, how much I'd isolated myself from the people in my life, that they didn't think I was approachable. So it changed my relationships with my family, with my friends, with my community. It made me realize that the most important thing I could do if I wanted to connect with people was to start letting them in to who I am. And that it wasn't just about what I knew. It wasn't just about me talking about magic or business processes, but it was about how I could share that in a way that really could help people relate. Because let's be honest here, people don't connect with people through information. They connect with people through emotion. And that's what I hadn't shared. I also ended up realizing that I needed to change my identity, that I needed to embrace my secret identity. Like, as I said at the beginning of this call, I'm a business wizard for eccentric entrepreneurs. That helped me realize that I needed to embrace that identity, that I needed to become the business wizard. I also recognized that I needed to identify who I really wanted to serve. For a long time, I've been saying, I want to work with small business owners. The problem is that that's such a vague group. There are lots of people who are small business owners. But not every one of them is a fit for me. And so what I ultimately realized is that I wanted to work with eccentric entrepreneurs, people who were spiritual, who are a little weird and different, who want to do something meaningful and change their lives. And so that's one of the things I changed. Okay, so then I told you that I ended up taking another break, and I did. I took a break from networking because I realized that if I was having trouble connecting with people through my writing, I probably was having trouble connecting with them through networking. And what I discovered during that break is I discovered that I was wasting a lot of money on networking and getting nowhere. I was attending these networking meetings where I was paying, X amount per month in order to be at these meetings. I was spending money on food, and I wasn't making the money back. I also it made me realize that I needed to stop going to networking meetings, because networking meetings weren't helping me. They weren't the way that I was going to connect with my audience. This is why I decided to shift everything to an online business. It's why I'm doing it's why I'm teaching classes through webinars. And through virtual, because I realized it wasn't working. When I stopped networking, it wasn't just stopping networking at business meetings. I really looked at my pagan events as well. And I looked at the fact that when I typically went to bookstores, I didn't get a lot of people who signed up. And the bookstore owners are really flaky. So I decided to stop presenting at bookstores. I also ended up writing my open letter to the pagan convention scenes, where I basically called out a bunch of questionable practices. The reason I did that is because, again, I was going to these conventions and I was spending, upwards of $1,000, and I was coming home in the red because I'd sell some books, but I wasn't making really much money, and there was no help with the expenses. So it forced me to really come face to face with the fact that I needed to change everything about what I was doing. I needed to change my writing. I needed to change how I connected with people on social media. I needed to change how I connected with people in general. And that's what failure does, is that when you fully face failure, it forces you to look at everything that you've done and discover what doesn't work as well as what does work. And when you'll figure out pretty quickly that pretty much 90% of what you've been doing hasn't worked. And why did you do it? You did it because other people told you to, or you did it because you watched what other people did and you were trying to be like those people. And that's the biggest failure of all, is when you're in business, you can't be like anyone else. Like, you can admire what someone else does and you can learn from them, but you can't be them, because what works for them will not work for you. You have to be yourself, genuinely, authentically yourself. And that's a real challenge, because it forces you to face the fact that, yeah, really, I can't be Taylor Elwood. because Taylor Elwood, if I'm pretending to be someone else here, because Taylor Elwood is Taylor Elwood, and how he handles things isn't going to be the way that I handle things. For example, for me, what I really had to embrace is I had to embrace the fact that, you know, there's a huge part of me that's very curious about the world, and another part of me that's really dissatisfied with the world as the way it is. Not everyone is dissatisfied, and not everyone is curious. So trying to be like me is not going to work for you. And even if you are dissatisfied and curious, you're still being like me isn't going to work, because that may what I'm dissatisfied about or curious about may not be what you're dissatisfied or curious about. So it's really important to understand that when you're looking at why you're failing, a huge part of why you're failing probably is because you're trying too hard to be like someone else. You got to be yourself. But the other thing is, when you're trying to be like that person, you're probably trying to do all the things that you think that person does. And so just stop second guessing yourself. Figure out what really works for you. And what works for you is not going to be the same as what works for me or what works for anyone else. There may be certain things that you do that are in common. Like you may have an email newsletter list, like I have. You may have a blog, like I have. But just because you have those things doesn't mean that you have to do them the way that I do them. So I really want to urge you to recognize that about yourself, and to recognize that part of failure is trying to do what other people do, and that really, to be successful, you have to embrace who you are and do that. Now, it might sound very pop psychologist-like, and I want to make sure that it's clear that it's not. It is, if anything, yeah, we do have different audiences. That's really important to acknowledge. If anything, it's just an essential truth. And that different truth, that essential truth is this: the person who's best qualified to make you successful in life is you. Well, how does that person make you successful? By being yourself. And a lot of times what I find is that we second guess ourselves in business. We try really hard to fit into some type of image that we think other people have of us. And if you've ever done that, you know that that image is actually a prison. That's what I did for a long time. I tried so hard to fit into the image of a business coach. You know, I'd get these suits, I'd dress up, I'd try and appear as normal as possible, and it was a prison. I wasn't being myself. I wasn't being myself, and I was failing as a result. So those are some of the things that I ended up learning when I took those breaks. Now, the other thing I'm going to say about failure is that what failure does is it can teach you one of three things that are important. So there are three things that you want to be able to take away in regards to failure and what it can teach you. First of all, failure can teach you, if you're banging your head against a wall, when to actually stop and step away. So if you've been following my journey this last year, you know that a couple different times I've launched classes, and those classes flopped. And why did they flop? I'll tell you why. One, I was trying to do what someone else did. I'd taken a class from her, and it was a great class for the first 4 sessions. Great in terms of talking about the importance of needing to be yourself and all that other stuff. But when it came to the class launch section, it didn't work very well. And part of the reason is I don't think she really knows what makes her successful in that way. I think that, you know, she has kind of a rough idea. But the problem was, again, I was trying to be like this person, and it didn't work very well. So what I did differently is, instead of trying to force it and make it successful, I tried her way twice. I tried it with 2 different class launches, didn't work, and I walked away from it. Knowing when to walk away from something is absolutely essential. Sometimes you're going to fail, and you're going to keep trying to beat your head against a brick wall. And guess what? That brick wall isn't going to break, but your head's going to get real bloody. I use that metaphor because it's important to realize that sometimes you can put yourself through a lot of pain trying to make something successful. So sometimes the best thing you can do is to walk away. And I'm not saying you can't come back to what you want to do at some point down the line. But what I'm saying is, until you figured out what isn't working about it, walk away. The only thing I could figure out about those class launches that wasn't working was that I was trying too hard to do what this person had done. So I walked away. Now, the other thing that you can learn is how to actually go back and look at your process and figure out where you failed. One of the things that I figured out in regards to a couple other activities that I was doing is I figured out where I was failing. Like, for example, with the writing, I figured out the reason I was failing there was that I was too impersonal and cold and intellectual. That's why I was failing. No one wanted to read what I was writing because it was just very impersonal. But in regards to like a class launch that I did, one of the things that I learned about why I was failing there was that what I was doing is again, I wasn't connecting with people in a very personal way. Once I started making things a little more personal, that class, it was the Process of Magic class, that class started getting more people. I went from having maybe only 2 people sign up for the class, which wasn't a lot, to getting 8 people to sign up for the class 2 times in a row. Now, I think 8 people 2 times in a row is great. Would I like more? You better believe I would like more. But I realized that even having that, but even seeing that big of an improvement was a success. And part of it was that I looked at how I was sharing the information. Was I coming off too salesy? Was I coming off too strong? Yes, I was. And that wasn't working. Even now, I'm experimenting with some of the ways that I promote my classes and really some of the ways I connect with people in general. This week, I decided to do an experiment where I'm sending an email every day of the week to my newsletter. And today I wrote this email and I was very upfront with people. I'm like, look, I'm going to send you a newsletter. And what's going to happen is you're going to get an email from me each day. I'm going to try to be more personal. I'm going to let you in. I'm going to tell you stories. I'm going to connect with you. I'm going to occasionally pitch you because, I have stuff I want to sell. So there you go. But I am going to do this every day. And if you don't want to get an email from me every day, then unsubscribe now, and that's okay, no hard feelings. But if you do want to get an email from me every day and you want to be part of this journey, then welcome aboard. And I shared that email today. Why am I doing this? Because I'll tell you, you have to be willing to experiment. And that's the third thing with failure that you learn is that with failure, you have to be willing to experiment. You have to be willing to take chances because the truth is you will fail. And it's only through failure that you're going to begin to discover what actually works. What I've been finding with my newsletters is that I'm not getting a huge amount of opens. And I'm not happy about that. I want to figure out what I could be doing differently. Well, when I started being a bit more personal this last time around with my latest email, I got more opens. So that tells me right there that I need to be more personal. Well, how am I going to be more personal? I'm going to tell you, how I'm going to be more personal is I'm going to write an email every day. I'm not going to write it once a week because if I write it once a week, I'm not going to get into the habit of being more personal. So I'm going to take a risk, and I may lose a ton of people from my newsletters, and I'm okay with that. Because those people, if they weren't reading my newsletters on a regular basis, they weren't my clients anyway. If they weren't signing up for something from me, they weren't my clients anyway. And that's really important. In fact, that actually leads us to another point about failure, that sometimes why you fail is that you haven't taken the time to define what makes something successful for you. So what I mean is that you really haven't defined your results. For me, I recognized that I needed to define my results better than I was defining them with my business. That's one of the reasons I'm writing those emails every day, because my feeling on it is if I get a bunch of people to unsubscribe, that's great. They're gone. I'm no longer sending emails to them. I'm no longer paying money for them. To be on my newsletter. I'm no longer spending all this time trying to reach these people and not getting anywhere. And it's very frustrating when you're trying to reach people. So I'm willing to experiment, and I'm also willing to let go. And that's a huge part about failure too, is that failure teaches you how to let go. Because if you hold on to failure and you hold on to what makes you fail and you feel depressed and unhappy about it, you're not going to learn anything. You're going to be unhappy and stressed about it. But if you're willing to let go, to just let go, then you don't hold on to it and you're able to learn. You're no longer attached. So you need to define your results. And in my case, defining my results is I'm going to write these email newsletters to see if I get more opens. And if I get more, and if I get people to unsubscribe. What I really want is I want more opens. I want people opening and reading it. And ultimately, I want them signing up for classes, because that's the whole point of me doing this. I want them to sign up for classes. I want to teach them. I want to share with them what I have to offer. That's not going to happen if I'm not willing to get them on board with what I'm trying to do. That's so you got to be willing to experiment, and you got to be willing to let go. And I'm willing to let go of all the people who unsubscribe, because I'm not feeling I won't feel personally offended if they unsubscribe. I'm not going to cry tears and be upset. I'm just going to be like, okay, thank you for unsubscribing, because you have liberated me from continuing to write to you, and you've liberated yourself from hearing me. And that's great. I would rather that you did that than hold on to something that you're not enjoying. Okay, so I'm gonna at this time just open it up for Q&A. I've kind of shared some ideas about failure. Hopefully you have some takeaways. So we're gonna wrap this up here in a few minutes. So what questions do you have for me? Feel free to type those in, and I will answer them. And if I don't get a question in a minute or two, then I'll just wrap up and all that. So you want, oh, okay. Well, I just wonder, what have you been most successful at? That's a good question, Sarah. You know, I'm going to love, because if we want to learn things from you, what should we trust you most for? Oh, good question. Okay. I'm going to tell you there actually have been a couple things I've been successful at. It may not seem like it, but I really have. First things first, I actually have been pretty successful as an author. You know, I've written a number of books, and they're all selling pretty well. And I've been pretty successful at writing. So if you want to learn from me how to write and how to publish a book, that's great. And if you want to learn how to do some of the other things that I'm learning right now and getting more successful at, then that's something too. Because one of the things that I've been successful at is learning how to change everything that I'm doing and turn it around and try new things. And I think that is a success. Like embracing my identity and creating around this identity a brand that draws people in. That is something that I've been successful at in the course of this last year. What else have I been successful at? You know, I think that one thing I've been successful at is actually running multiple businesses at the same time and getting things done, and creating systems and processes in order to get things done. I am really good at doing that, and that's not something just anyone's good at. I've noticed that a lot of people will, even with just one business, will have a hard time developing systems and processes to make their business successful. And that's something I've been able to teach other people very successfully. So those are some of the things that I'm good at. Yeah, identity, book writing, prioritize, and organizing. That's a good list. Yeah. So those are things that I'm good at. And I'll tell you, you know, I'm getting better at other things all the time. I think that, you know, I guess in one sense what I'm really good at is I'm good at learning. And I'm good at taking what I learn and teaching people about it and making it into something that people can understand. Because a lot of times what I notice is that other people who teach aren't very good at teaching. they get very they don't know how to break things down in a way that's approachable, and that's something that I do. And you know that, Sarah, because you're taking my eccentric success class right now. So you've gotten a chance to see that. And I'll add one other thing that I think I'm good at, and it's actually really important. I'm good at being transparent about what I'm not good at, and sharing with you what I'm doing to get better at it, and teaching you how to avoid making my mistakes. And a lot of people aren't comfortable doing that. I have no problem doing that, because the fact of the matter is, if I think it actually builds more trust and credibility when I say to you, you know what, I tried this and I really fucked it up. But hey, if you do this, you won't have that same result, or if you do it this way. And so that's one of the reasons why I started sharing this whole thing, writing about failure a lot this last month, because it was like, wow, people aren't comfortable with failure. I wasn't comfortable with failure. I need to make sure to show people why they need to be comfortable with failure. And I think I have helped out a lot. I've had a number of comments this month, and eccentric entrepreneurs and elsewhere, where people are like, you know, you sharing your own failures and sharing how to be comfortable has really helped me become more comfortable with myself and be more open to learning. So that's something I'm good at too. And I think it's a good thing to be good at. Okay, any other questions? Well, while you're thinking about questions, I'm just because I'm gonna be sharing this video on my YouTube thing here in a little bit. What I'm gonna tell you right now is that Eccentric Success, which Sarah is part of, is gonna start up the next round starting in October, and we're gonna be talking about landing pages and what landing pages are and how to use them. A lot of people were very confused about landing pages. For a long time, I was confused about landing pages. I didn't know what landing pages were. And people would be talking about it, and it just seemed like a marketing buzzword. We're going to explore what landing pages are and why you want them, and how they can help you to actually convert people to become your readers and your fans, and eventually your clients. And that's what we want. So that's what we're going to learn in Eccentric Success, and sign up for that. It ends in, well, it ends soon. It ends like on September 30th. I'm going to actually post the link to Eccentric Success, because I know that the other person watching this right now is not on Eccentric Success. So if you want to actually sign up today, you can do that. And if you don't, that's fine too. And then for those people who are going to be watching this video, you'll see a link for Eccentric Success in the video as well. So I'm going to just go and post it. And here we are. There you go. Okay, folks, I'm going to wrap up here. I want to thank you for being on this free webinar. We do this every month, and I'm going to keep doing it every month, regardless of how many people are here or not here, because I really want to help you guys out with your businesses. I want to help you be successful. And today we talked about the hard topic of failure, and I think that, you know, you learn how to embrace that, you go a long way toward becoming more successful. Certainly it's helped me a lot. And I would say that actually that this year, 2016, has been my best year in business. It has not been my most monetarily successful year. I want to note that. But it's been my best year. And the reason it's been my best year is because I've been more true to myself and happier doing what I'm doing than I was before. And I'll also note, and we'll find this out for sure at the end of the year, it may actually be my most profitable year. You may say, why is that, Taylor? And it's because I have not spent nearly as much money on things like conventions and things like that have not been netting me the return I needed. So it may actually be my most successful year. Go figure. Next year will be even better, but there you go. All right, so thank you everyone for being on the call, and take care and have a good day.